Hey guys, welcome back to my channel We Learn Together. This is your host Harish, and today I have brought you another video, but this time we are doing this video on Malaysia. We are going to do a history on Malaysia origin and its history. So with this video, I hope you have learned something new about their culture and their tradition, as well as their history, how they have formed as a country. The video is made by Masaman, Masaman channel. I would request you, please go to the original upload, like them, subscribe them. Also, if you find this video interesting, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your feedback in the comment section below. So let's find out the history of Malaysia.
After recently returning from a trip overseas to Asia, I got the chance to visit some amazing countries and places, but none piqued my interest so much as Malaysia and its people. Although you can still find many living more rural, traditional lifestyles in the countryside, with the local Malay Muslims being rather friendly, tolerant, and curious of outsiders, in the city they are a cosmopolitan mix of many different cultures, religions, and nationalities, having some of the most impressive cityscapes of not only anywhere in Southeast Asia, but in the whole world. Despite seemingly being located in a rather isolated part of the world, in the past couple thousand years the area that would become Malaysia was involved with foreign powers from all corners of Eurasia, from Egypt, China, India, Iran, Europe, and elsewhere, being influenced by many different groups, but also diffusing their culture throughout the world. Malaysia is a rather odd country, being divided between two main geographic divisions, with the majority of the population living on peninsular Malaysia just south of Thailand, while the majority of the land area is to the east, with a large enclave on the island of Borneo, or Kalimantan as it is known in Indonesia. However, this is far less populated, containing only 20% of the country's population, with a handful of minor islands also scattered around as well. The reason for this geographical anomaly is due to the fact that Malaysia is actually a bit of a conglomeration of multiple separate British colonies, and former Dutch and Portuguese as well, which were divided between what were known as the Strait Settlement, a mostly Chinese inhabited area consisting of coastal regions such as Penang, Malacca, and Singapore. Yes, Singapore was formerly a part of Malaysia, as well as other areas of peninsular Malaysia and the eastern territories on Borneo. However, the actual history of the Malay nation dates back many centuries before the formation of the modern country we see today, but as with virtually any other group, we can trace back the steps of time and see just who inhabited this land before the modern Malays. The previous inhabitants of the Malay Peninsula are referred to as the Proto-Malays, a diverse Austroasiatic speaking bunch who are most likely the result of a southern migration from Indochina who intermixed with the original Negrito or Australoid inhabitants of Southeast Asia, specifically referred to as the Orang Asli or Aslians, literally meaning native or indigenous inhabitants in Malay. The Aslians are still located in the interior of peninsular Malaysia in small numbers, and as opposed to the Islamic Malays, are mostly practitioners of their native animistic religions or Christianity, and their culture and appearance is remarkably contrast from that of the majority, being darker, shorter, and sharing facial features more reminiscent of Australoid populations. Some would say African, but just like other Negrito populations in the Philippines and the Andaman Islands, they are very, very genetically distinct from the African population, perhaps even more so than the surrounding East Asian descended peoples that came after them. The Austronesians were the next major group to reach the Malay Peninsula, but curiously, the Malays actually originated on the nearby island of Sumatra rather than peninsular Malaysia, although they are closely related to other Austronesian populations on the island of Borneo. The Malayu Kingdom was the first real Malaysian nation, spreading out from Sumatra to mainland Asia and many of the surrounding islands such as Bangka, Belitung, and Bintan, although they never really conquered the densely forested interior of the peninsula, leaving the Aslian tribes to survive in isolation for over 1,000 years. In a recent video over the origin and history of the Tamils, I discussed the massive historical influence of the Tamil people on Southeast Asia from thousands of years ago, and the large Tamil influence on Austronesian, Thai, and Cambodian culture. But even I didn't know at the time that the name of Malaysia itself possibly has a Tamil origin, from the words Malay-ur, meaning mountainous land, although it is contested whether this is the actual root or not. During this time, Malaysia had massive influence from both India and China, and I've already made a video over the Chinese impact on Southeast Asia since antiquity, and the influence is seen in language, culture, religion, and genetics, and might be a subject I discuss in the future, with most of the direct contact being between South Indian Dravidians rather than the North. The Malay identity and nation slowly developed over thousands of years, with one of the most defining factors being the spread of Islam to the region around the 1300s, although Islamic Arab traders had been visiting the region since the 7th century AD, and pre-Islamic Arabs had been arriving even before that. The previous religions of the Malays, mostly Hinduism, Buddhism, and traditional religions, quickly went extinct, although their influence is still felt in the cultural practices of Malays even to this day. And keep in mind, the Malays, being one of the most removed Islamic peoples from the Islamic homeland, both geographically and culturally, are not quite as conservative as those in the Middle East. Even though by law all ethnic Malays must be adherents of the Sunni Islamic faith, they are far less strict than many other Islamic nations, although this has changed a bit in more recent years, with many leaning towards the more fundamentalist practices seen in parts of Indonesia. One of the biggest upheavals in the Malaysian history was the encroachment by the European powers, with there actually being a plethora of groups who have held territory in Malaysia, chronologically the Portuguese, Dutch, and British, and their influence can be seen in the modern Malay language as well as certain cultural aspects, with Malaysia proper eventually being absorbed by the British, while the Malay inhabited areas of Indonesia went to the Dutch. The label of Malay is actually a rather fluid one as far as centralized ethnicities go, as due to the extremely high degree of migration to and from Malay territory, their ancestors are quite heterogeneous, as actual ethnic Malays may additionally have Arab, Chinese, Indian, European, ASEAN, or especially Indonesian heritage, with around 10 to 20% of Malays in Malaysia having some recent ancestry from Indonesian migrants, mostly Javanese, Acehnese, or Sundanese. After as little as a generation or two, these groups eventually become completely assimilated into the Malay population and are no longer considered a different people by the government or other citizens. However, the term Malaysian can be used for any citizen of Malaysia who may be of Chinese, Indian, Eurasian, or Malay heritage, or may belong to the other indigenous groups such as the ASEANs of the interior, while in the eastern half of the country there are many other Austronesian descended peoples with a highly divergent culture such as the Bajau, Dayak, or a multitude of others, and may practice Islam, Christianity, or their indigenous tribal religions. This is a map of what is known as the Malay world, not to be confused with Greater Malaysia, which is often just used for the entirety of the Austronesian-speaking world, while the Malay world specifically refers to Malaysia and all Malay inhabited areas of the surrounding regions, even though in large parts of Malaysia itself, Malays are only a small minority due to massive amounts of immigration from China, India, and elsewhere. Now, due to their involvement with various European colonial powers, the Malays have been scattered all around the world, similar to the distribution of Tamils, with there being a community in South Asia known as the Sri Lankan Malays, who aren't really Malaysian, a group in Australia known as the Cocos Malay, who aren't really Malaysian, Cape Malays in South Africa, who again aren't exactly Malaysian, and Singaporean Malays, who aren't actually, well, Singaporean Malays are actually more Malaysian than any of the previous groups, as we'll go over. You also have the Kristang, a Christian mixed-race Creole people of Malay, Portuguese, Indian, Dutch, and or other ancestry scattered throughout the country who speak a creolized form of Portuguese mixed with Malaysian, although only numbering in the tens of thousands across the country, but I'll be saving that for an upcoming video on Eurasian Creole groups in Asia. Similar to Arabs, the Chinese, or various Indian peoples, the Malays are more of a pan-ethnic group based off shared culture, language, and religion, rather than an actual centralized ethnicity that share a large degree of ancestry, with the Javanese in Indonesia being a good contrast to this. The various Malay groups today are mostly the result of the assimilation of local populations rather than the result of mass settlement from the Sumatran or Peninsular Malays. For instance, there are also very large numbers of Malays along the coast of Borneo, especially in the small country of Brunei situated right in eastern Malaysia, another former British territory which almost joined Malaysia but decided to become independent. Although officially around 60 to 70% of the country identifies as ethnically Malay, the Bruneian Malays are mostly the result of assimilated natives of Borneo, such as the Katazans, Ibans, and Dayak, with this also being true of many of the self-identified Malays of Sabah, Sarawak, and West Kalimantan in Indonesia. In southern Thailand, ethnic Malays straight up make up a majority in many southern provinces near the border with Malaysia, which has led to some issues of ethnic separatism in recent years, with some Malays being more heavily integrated into Thai society than others. Nearby in Indonesia, although actual ethnic Malays are only a small percentage of the population due to their very influential historical position in the society, a Malay dialect heavily influenced by local languages known as Indonesian has become one of the most widespread languages in the country, with Malay and Indonesian being two dialects of the same language, although other languages of Indonesia such as Javanese, Balinese, or Sundanese are not mutually intelligible. The Betawi are a unique people group that are the result of a fusion of all these different Indonesian ethnic groups with minor foreign impact from the Arabs, Indians, Chinese, Portuguese, and Dutch, who are located in Jakarta, formerly known as Batavia, which is where their name derives. In Singapore, the vast majority of the population is of immigrant origin from the past couple centuries, and even though the island, originally known as Pulau Ujang, was first inhabited by Malays, they are now only a moderately sized minority, although the Malay label also includes other Islamic Austronesian descendants, so Singaporean Malays are mostly Malay, albeit with a strong Javanese Sundanese influence. All the other diaspora groups mentioned earlier are the result of the Dutch or British bringing in small number of workers from the Malay archipelago to their overseas colonies, and over time the plethora of different Austronesian groups gradually intermixed and became one people, while also heavily intermixing with the local population as well. For instance, the 250,000 Cape Malays in South Africa also have moderate amounts of European, African, and South Asian ancestry, but are united under their common Austronesian and Islamic heritage, and Sri Lankan Malays have large amounts of ancestry from native Sri Lankan groups like the Sinhalese or Tamils, although there are only around 50,000 remaining. Including the Malay population in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Brunei, and the overseas diaspora, there are around 36 million ethnic Malays worldwide, although the fluid nature of the Malay identity does complicate this a bit. So in conclusion, the Malays are one of the most fascinating tribes of the Far East, who have a long history of interaction with many different ancient civilizations and great empires. So go ahead and let me know your thoughts on the Malays as a people and the history of Malaysia. And for today's poll, tell me which Malaysian diaspora or overseas group is of the most interest to you.
That's it for the video, guys. That's a long video of 12 minutes, but it's provide us very detailed information about the origin and the history of Malaysian people. As I was not aware of that, Malaysia is divided in two parts. Malaysia is divided in two parts. One Malaysia in Peninsula and other one is Brunei, Brunei, if I'm pronouncing it right. I was not aware of that. I never thought that the landscape of the geography of Malaysia and Indonesia, it's so diverse. The Tamilan from the South India, they have major influence in Malaysia. Even the name of Malaysia is Malay from the Tamil word. I was not aware of the content that they have provided, and they have specified the detail, the number of ethnicity have merged, migrated in Malaysia, in Indonesia, which make them a very diverse, similar to India, which have more diverse ethnicity. Many regions is there, many peoples are there. They have converted into Islamism, they have converted into Christianity, Hinduism. They created a new ethnic group by merging, marrying, and so much information. But they accept everyone. They treat everyone all together. They don't feel that any group, any particular region or any particular culture is below them. They accepted them even in the past, even in the when the Britishers were enslaved India or enslaved many regions of Asia. They were still adapting with them. They have learned something with them. So like for me, Malaysia is a very unique country. If you learn something new with this video, I would request you again, if you like this channel, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your feedback in the comment section below. I'll try to bring some more interesting video about the different cultures and countries. Till next time, peace out. Bye bye.